27. Good morning, Dr. Omnia.
Good morning.
So, Dr. Omnia, can you talk to us about the importance of youth participation in global issues, especially those related to serving environmental goals and raising awareness of climate change?
Yes, sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the breakfast show.
Yes, thank you.
In terms of youth, there are two particular reasons why we and our meaningful participation is important. The first, we are the biggest demographic. We are 1.4 billion across the world. And this means that the impacts of global issues, especially climate change, affects us the most. And then the second reason is that as young people, we are affected, and our health, future, and prosperity is affected disproportionately by the detrimental impacts of climate change.
Yes.
We are seeing now extreme weather events, and children born in 2020 are going to see 8 times the number of cyclones, flooding, as well as hurricanes, more than a person who was born in 1960. Which means that we are affected and we will continue to suffer the most under the inadequate climate measures that we are seeing now.
Yes. So, to what extent does the Journey to the Climate Summit initiative contribute to documenting the effects of climate change on the governance rates of the Republic and its various development sectors?
The Climate Change Conference is a unique opportunity to first look at how the changing climate is affecting Egypt
Yes.
and the world in a way that is accelerating, both on food security, water security,
Yes.
as well as mental health and the physical health of our people and communities. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for action because now Egypt is leading COP in terms of translating the pledges that were made by world leaders into implementation mechanisms to address the climate crisis.
Yes. And how important is the launching of applicable initiatives that can contribute to addressing environmental issues in general and the challenge of climate change in particular?
I think as being the first youth envoy, I had the opportunity to see already the grassroots initiatives that are led by youth on climate change. I've seen diversity of local solutions that can be scaled up, led by young Egyptian entrepreneurs, farmers, as well as solution makers and innovators, from developing small-scale affordable technologies to save water, to building green buildings for vulnerable communities to help them adapt to the heat, as well as creating solar-powered technologies for water heaters and different upcycling initiatives and cleaning of the Nile, as well as the beaches from the plastic, to developing bans on the use of plastic on a governmental level.
So, what is your role as official responsible for youth of COP27? What is the role you play to help raise youth awareness of the issue of climate change and environmental pollution, while also raising awareness of ways to adapt to climate change?
Yes, this is the first time ever in the 26 years of the climate conference that there is a youth envoy for the president. And I am the link between youth-led needs, voices, work, and solutions, and the COP president was our Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the leader of the negotiations, which means that I raise awareness around not just climate change, but the importance of the climate conference in translating the action, especially as is led by young people, into the policy-making space and the decision-making of climate change.
Yes, can you tell me more about the youth participation in the upcoming COP27, and do we have youth from foreign countries?
Yes, this is the first time this COP that, first of all, we have the Conference of Youth on Climate Change, which is taking place from the 2nd to the 4th of November in Sharm el-Sheikh as well, where we're going to have over 1,000 young people from around the world join us to build their capacity on climate change and the climate policy, and at the same time develop the Global Youth Statement, which is the youth advocacy tool that will be used at COP by young delegates coming. The second thing is that we also have a youth pavilion at COP, which is a space for youth-led events over the 2 weeks of COP from 9 to 6, inviting policymakers, private sector, and different civil society organizations to engage and co-create policy recommendations with young people. There's also the Youth for COP platform that I have worked on with the Ministry of Youth, and we have invited young people around the world to submit their actions so that we can share it on this platform in the lead up to COP to empower and elevate the work of young people to get the technical and the financial support that they need for networking as well as at the conference itself.
And how can the government support the National Strategy 2050, which aims to achieve sustainable economic growth with low emissions in various sectors?
I think Egypt, in the lead up to COP, has been exemplary in terms of supporting both local grassroots initiatives and the strategy itself. One initiative I can share that Dr. Mahmoud Wahideen, who is His Excellency the UN High-Level Champion, and he has been working on an initiative that works directly with governorates and supports local initiatives in a sort of an incubator, and at the same time the government has been working extensively with universities under his leadership to integrate climate change into the education across all the curricula, and will be taught during the period of COP across all the Egyptian universities. And then another aspect that the Ministry of Youth has been working on, which is having a caravan that builds climate awareness among youth, children and adolescents that went across 26 cities all over Egypt in collaboration with UNICEF.
Can you tell me about your efforts to spread awareness among Egyptian youths about the dangers of climate change?
Yes, sure. So first of all, I started with facilitating my own consultations to understand the needs and the knowledge gap among Egyptian youth and the broader youth globally. And then I facilitated diversity of sessions to engage youth beyond the climate change science and the climate solutions, but how to be meaningfully engaged in climate policy. This was across a series of events. One of them was the COP simulation, which was the biggest simulation organized by the British University in Egypt, and it invited youth from Egypt and around the world for 2 weeks to build their capacity to understand how COP works and what it is to be in the climate global forum. In addition to the conference of youth that were done locally and regionally, where I was able to speak and empower young people from Egypt around climate change. I also delivered several lectures. One of them was in Cairo University to medical students who, like myself, to build their capacity in understanding the link between climate change and health.
Yes. So can you tell me about the agenda of youth in COP27?
Yes, we have two main priorities.
Yes.
The first, we want to transform and empower the way that youth are part of the climate conference to go beyond just participating and facilitating our own sessions, but to be equal and natural partners to the climate agenda.
Yes.
And that is why the presidency, for the first time, we're organizing a policy dialogue between ministers, heads of delegations, negotiators, and young people to co-create policy asks for the negotiations that the presidency can then carry on, and this will take place on November 10th during the Youth and the Future Generations Day.
Yes. And how important is the role of civil society and individuals in facing climate changes and working on sustainable development, and the necessity of integration and coordination with the role of the state and the private sector?
Climate change is a multidisciplinary crisis and a complex one. and it needs the participation of every sector of the society. And one of the main and the key sectors are the civil society, including individuals, and the youth-led organizations. As civil society, we have an innovative capacity, but we also have a powerful voice to push for the urgency and the seriousness that the climate emergency needs. And this is why Egypt and the presidency is keen on one of the key priorities is collaboration, which means empowering the role of civil society in driving the climate justice as well as intergenerational equity, both for young climate activists as well as innovators, but also for the broader civil society and grassroots activism that is held for climate change.
Yes. And in your opinion, what is the significance of Egypt's hosting such a big event here in Egypt, and how can it help in serving Egypt's agenda in the field of climate change?
This is the first time in 6 years that COP is happening in Egypt, and that is why Egypt is leading, as we say, the implementation COP and the African COP, because there is an opportunity, and as Egypt in Africa, we're able to bring in the issues that affect us and our continent the most. We have seen in previous COPs a lot of commitments that were directed towards, for example, climate mitigation and clean energy, but far less for adaptation and loss and damage, which has impacted us and the most vulnerable countries most, with the least funding to support that. And Egypt is going to lead the negotiations and place issues such as adaptation and loss and damage at the forefront to ensure that we as Africa are able to adapt to the impacts of climate change that has been affecting our health, our economies in a disproportionate way.
Yes. So can you tell me about your activities in the field of environmental issues and serving climate change agenda?
So I started 7 years ago when I was a second-year medical student, and I joined the International Federation of Medical Students Association, the IFMC, and that is when I went to my first ever COP, which was in Poland. And then the year after, in COP25 in Madrid, I was the head of my delegation of medical students, and together we worked on different side events, as well as collaborated with the World Health Organization, the UN, and we published a diversity of surveys and commentaries advocating for placing health at the heart of the climate negotiation to bring in the seriousness of how climate change and climate action is needed. And then one of my biggest passions is climate education, and that is why now I'm working with our head of university in Ain Shams, Dr. Mahmoud al-Mutaini, on developing a climate curriculum, not just for Egyptian universities, but for all of African universities, so that it is an integral part of the curriculum that is being taught to thousands of students who can be well prepared to face the effects of climate crisis and develop the groundbreaking solutions to address climate change.
Yes. Do you expect that the upcoming climate change conference will adopt certain recommendations, and how can we put these recommendations into to be applied later?
Every climate change conference develops what is known as the COP decision and a pact, which we are planning to do. And this pact is also on the government, but also on us as civil society and youth, to utilize the commitments that the countries have signed on and ask for their implementation, but also work together on implementing the commitments that the countries have signed on. It's also our role to hold our governments and the different stakeholders, including the private sector, accountable for such commitments and for its implementation, to ensure that we are on a track that builds towards climate action and resilience.
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Omnia Al-Omrani, Youth Envoy to COP27. Thank you for being with us, Omnia. And it is worth mentioning that Egypt will host the 27th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP27, from the 7th to the 18th of November 2022 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and represents an important opportunity to consider the effect of climate change in Africa. Dear viewers, a short break and we'll be back with our second segment for today, so stay tuned.
It's the world's most witnessed event. The Mother of the World invites you to confront together the climate crisis. Efforts united in fulfilling global goals. Solutions for the world's most pressing challenges. COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, 2022.